Well, it's safe to say that at some point you have had your reality denied by someone else, right? So, in other words, you've lived an experience, X, Y, and Z experience, no matter what it was, and then someone who also was a part of that experience probably hit you with something along the lines of, it never happened that way, or that never happened, or whatever variation you were given. At the end of the day, you were given some form of that. And the purpose of sharing this video with you today is to let you know that even if someone denies your reality, it shouldn't change what you've experienced, what you have felt. It's very easy for us to be influenced by someone, essentially, as the kids call it. I think it's called gaslighting. I found this statistic before hopping on and recording this video that almost 50% of adults in a recent study have experienced just that, right? The kids call it gaslighting. 50% of adults have experienced that in some way, shape, or form. There were actually a bunch of other statistics related to that about how much it happens in relationships or wherever it has. But as someone that might be a black sheep, where you have grown up, you felt neglected, or your needs weren't met, or isolated, or just not understood, it's really easy for us as black sheep to experience this. Meaning, you might finally get to the point where you are pursuing your quote unquote healing journey. And as you're going through life, you're like, you know what? I really want to confront this person that I feel like didn't treat me well in this particular situation. And you build up all of this courage and you build up all of these strengths that go into actually having those really difficult conversations, whether it's a parent, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a friend or whomever, a mentor, it doesn't even matter. All of the things that go into the characteristics that go into such a hard conversation, you go into it and you start to confront this individual, and it's like, hey, do you remember that particular situation, that experience that we lived together? I just wanted to let you know that what you did or what I did and what it resulted in, it really made me feel X, Y, and Z, to only be zapped in the moment where it's like, that didn't happen. It is very, very common according to that statistic. By the way, I'm Matt. This is the Decoding Success podcast, and we really appreciate you being here for this. I want to rattle off a few things that really stand out. I don't want to tell stories about my personal experiences with this for the sake of really maintaining some boundaries with personal life, because at the end of the day, I do believe these situations are divinely placed in our world so that we can grow, we can evolve, we can learn from them. We could hop on a podcast and talk about them to help someone else navigate them. But I will say that I have literally experienced them as recent as a few weeks ago, to the point where I was expressing what I felt in a particular situation to be told that it never happened. And just to remind you, the reason of this episode is not to put together a pity party for all of us that have experienced it, but to, number one, let you know that you're not alone, that there's a community of people out there that have experienced it. It's insanely common according to the statistic that was given out, and more so, inspire some behaviors that I've personally deployed to navigate these situations where, hey, the commonality of experience gaslighting or the commonality of having your reality denied should not impact the reality that you live by. So the first thing is to really just understand that people perceive things differently. Now, this is not an excuse for anyone that is going through the trauma associated with gaslighting, because there are definitely different levels to this. But it is important to have that background knowledge that there are people that perceive experiences differently, right? You and I could be walking down a street in New York City, we see a pit bull, and you run up to that pit bull and you look at me and I'm like Usain Bolt running in the opposite direction as fast as I can. And that's based on our experiences, and our experiences shape what we perceive and how we perceive things. And that's okay. We are all highly individualistic humans. So having the background knowledge that, oh, wait, maybe this person really didn't perceive it the same way is just good to have in the back of our mind. Again, that's not an excuse for anyone, especially those that are experiencing really traumatic experiences around gaslighting, but just know, hey, yeah, okay, we could both have the same experience and just view it different. I have a buddy of mine, he oftentimes graces this podcast, and I joke with him all the time. I'm referring to my buddy Phil Massia. I joke with him all the time. I'm like, dude, yeah, we were on that same trip, but that's not how it happened. And after a while, I realized, hey, I have to let him live his experience the way that it's lived. Now, of course, this is a much more positive situation than gaslighting, but just hearing the way someone lived an experience that you also lived, and it's like, man, what made you remember it that way? And then what made me remember it the way that I remembered it? So, give you some background knowledge first. Number two, if possible, I think it's really important to identify the intention of the denial. If you can, I'm not telling anyone to become, I Spy, Mr. Gadget, or some like full on detective, because exerting energy toward that is probably not going to be effective. But in certain situations, I think it is possible to just know what the intention is for someone potentially denying your reality. In the case of, going on a trip with someone, and I'm just using this as an example here, but like going on a trip with someone, living the same experience as the two of you are on different jet skis, or you're at a restaurant or you're at a club or whatever it is, and then when you're recapping the vacation after you get home and it's like, whoa, like, no, okay, so the intention there is that, hey, he or she just sees the world differently. On the other case, maybe it is a really strong form of manipulation. And if it's possible to identify the intention, I think it's easier for us to find peace in actions that are to come from there. The third thing just to talk about here is no matter what, we should not stop believing our reality. Now, there might be some situations where that's not true, but oftentimes, if you're for example, just a few weeks ago, when a particular individual in my life told me, hey, that's not how it happened, and I sat there and I'm like, man, kind of just going through everything that I'm talking to you about, going through it, and I'm like, oh, well, what's their intention? I don't think the intentional intention is harmful by any means. I don't think this person's like, oh, this makes me a bad person, so let me lie about it, or let me try to manipulate his thoughts or his feelings or his experience, right? And now I understand it. Hey, maybe they just perceived it differently. So believe your reality no matter what in most situations, right? I don't want anyone to walk away from this and be so heavily influenced by other people just because their reality is different. And that's the whole purpose of this. Like, our reality shouldn't be impacted by someone else's. Your feelings are valid, your experiences are valid, your thoughts about that are potentially even valid. Right? So, just some checkpoint things before inspiring some behaviors within you. The first behavior being, if you have experienced this, it is so important to begin to reclaim the trust in yourself. So and maybe you've experienced it more than once, which only enhances the fact that we need to trust ourselves. So in a world where, especially for black sheep, especially for the people that have been neglected or rejected or whatever, right? It's so common for us to put our trust in other people as opposed to ourselves. And this goes for people even far beyond black sheep, because I think it's a skill, probably the number one skill that we have to relearn, is learning how to trust in ourselves. Because we're not autonomous for a good portion of our life. We're reliant on other people, so we're trusting other people. As we're trusting other people, those people should really be helping us trust ourselves, but we can be leeches and reliant on the trust we put within them. The more trust we put within them, the more we get pulled in a direction outside of who we truly are. And while we're getting shaped and molded and conditioned into this person, we become further and further and further isolated from our core self. Hence how we get here. And all of that to be said, we lose trust in what we feel in our gut. So when the person that may have conditioned you or molded you or shaped you, maybe not with ill intention, but just life, parenting, moving through the motions of growing a human into this world, we put trust in them. And the minute they say to us, oh, you know what? No, that's not how that experience happened. Your feelings are invalid. And of course, being said in different ways than that, the light bulb goes off in our head and it's like, oh, well, my feelings, my experience, yeah, maybe it's not valid. Maybe I should listen to them. That's where we lose the trust to ourselves. So if you're walking away from this episode with any behavior, It's reclaim the trust that you feel in your gut. When you have that feeling in your gut about whatever it may be, explore its validity. Even if it's something as little as, should I have pizza for lunch or should I have this? I'm really leaning more towards the cleaner meal. Trust your gut in situations like that and start acting in that direction of whatever it's guiding you to, and you will see how the muscle begins to strengthen and strengthen for more serious situations like navigating gaslighting. The second behavior I want to leave you with here is that in some scenarios, we have to remember that people are humans too. And it goes back to understanding that people perceive things differently. Again, intention is a really big word when it comes to this. And if in some way, shape, or form you could sniff that there's no form of manipulation in the air, I think it's safe to say that we have to realize that people are just living their human experience to the best of their ability as well. And we have to control, to whatever extent we can, control's a weird word to use, but let's go with it. In some way, shape, or form, we have to control, to whatever extent we can, our human experience. And we can't control how someone else perceives an event, so why exert energy in the direction of confronting them or maybe even trying to change what they believe based on what we feel? What we feel is what we need to own. And what they feel or what they think or what they believe about that experience is on them. Of course, manipulation is a part of this whole scenario in some cases. So I'm not saying to bow down to the manipulator by any means, and I don't want to sound insensitive because I know how deep and how traumatic these experiences could be for some people. But in other cases where the reality is denied, some people are just living their human experience, and the way they see the world is the way they see the world. Some people see the world through rose-colored glasses, others see it through like cool blue glasses. In some scenarios, maybe you're able to come together and see an experience through purple lenses. Red and blue, I think, makes purple. Maybe it makes green. I don't know. Walter, do you know? I have no clue. I didn't take art, all right? But regardless, in some scenarios, maybe you're able to merge your visions and come together and see it as one, and in others, you're not. And that's okay. So again, this is Matt Labrie with the Decoding Success podcast, putting this episode out here to remind you that regardless of your reality being denied, your reality shouldn't shift because of that. Until next time, everyone, be blessed. Peace.